You mentioned Jim Cornette's name earlier on. I want to bring Jim up because obviously everybody knows the history between you two. What was it like for you to work with Jim Cornette when you came back? Was he already in the company when you came back, I believe?
Yeah, he was already there when I came back, I'm being totally honest with you now. It was a big concern of mine, and it had nothing to do with the way I felt about Jim Cornette, because I can work with Jim Cornette every day. Whether people believe that or not, that's up to them. He can't work with me, so it was a huge concern with me, just kind of how Jim was going to react, And, we got along fine, but again, philosophy-wise, it was just two completely different pages.
Did you guys butt head a lot?
We didn't butt heads because I got to be honest with you, I'm not, when it comes to wrestlers and when it comes to guys that have been around a long time, I'm not going to stand there and argue with them. Like, I'll stand there with Cornette, and I'll, say, okay, Jim, this is what we want to do. Okay? If Jim says, no, I want to do this, that, and the other thing, and here's the reason why, and Jim would get very passionate about it, so I know he really believed in it. 9 times out of 10, I did it the way he wanted to do it. And I'm not just saying Jim Cornette. If it were D'Lo, if it were Pat, if it were Al Snow, I have a respect for these guys and what they do. The only time I'll really trump somebody is if I know that idea is bad, that there's no way that's going to work. Then I'll kind of stick to my guns. But 9 times out of 10, I'll usually tap out and say, okay, let's try it that way.
Can you recall any cases that were really bad that you might have said that that's not going to work?
No, we never. When Jim and I were together, there was never this.
Right.
I mean, aside from what people want to believe, I never got in an argument with Jim. Jim and I never got into a fight. I mean, it's always the stuff when we're apart, and then I just start reading. I just get torn to shreds.
Right.
And I know I don't say a word about Jim publicly. I don't knock Jim. I don't say anything negative about Jim. As a matter of fact, you can go back and look in my books. I put Jim over. So when we worked together, there was never an argument. There was never the butting of heads. But it's kind of always when we go this way, then I just hear what kind of an imbecile I am.
When you first came in, did you have to sit down with Cornette behind closed doors and maybe hash things out, or was there a phone call conversation between you two? Or
you know what? That's a real good question. That's a real good question, Rob, because I was really concerned about it. Really concerned about it because I know Jim. I know how he is. And, that was one of the things where Jeff told me, Vince, let me handle this.
Right.
Just trust me, let me handle this. And I did let Jeff handle it. So that there was never a sit down or nothing like that because, Jeff wanted to handle it. I respected Jeff, and Jeff did whatever he did.
What was it like for the very first time going into the locker room and seeing Jim Cornette?
Bro, you want me to be totally honest? I remember, I'm almost positive it was a pay-per-view. And I remember being in my hotel room before I left for the hotel room, and I remember praying hard for 15 minutes. And it wasn't me. I mean, because I was fine with it. I was concerned of how Jim was going to react. I mean, I really, really was. And I think there was some bro, it's hard for me to remember really. I think there were a couple of instances like at the very beginning where he totally, just wouldn't even walk near me. I think that went on for a certain period of time.
Right.
But that kind of wore off, after a couple of months, and then I just worked with him like I would work with anybody else.
Do you think he was baby-facing you at all, or do you think he was being sincere? Because obviously after he left the company, and we'll talk about that, he went on the tirade and he called Terry Taylor up and threatened him and all that stuff. I mean, do you think that he was just baby-facing and, deep down inside he had...
Oh, yes. Yeah. But I mean, I don't want to say he was being a phony. I mean, he was being sincere. If he didn't like something, he told me he didn't like it. But I always knew that Jim Cornette could not stand me. I mean, no matter what, I knew deep down inside he hated me, and no matter what I did, that was never going to change.
We'll pretty much leave the Jim Cornette topic in a couple seconds. I want to ask you about Ed Ferrara when he came into the company.
Yeah.
And he didn't last very long. What happened with Ed and Jim Cornette? You know, obviously Jim was let go because of all that, and you hear, you know, you just read stuff in the sheets that pretty much the deal was if Ed was coming in, Jim would have to leave.
See, that's what I mean. Absolutely not true. And that's another thing I want to tell you about the sheets. And I don't want to sit here and lambaste the sheets because they'll just hate me more. But I do believe in being honest. And just another pet peeve of mine is when so much is happening and so much is being reported, I'm never contacted. Not one person tries to reach out to me and say, hey, Vince, we're hearing this. Did this happen? So everybody goes out there and reports whatever they want to report. There's nobody takes responsibility. Nobody. I mean, and like I said, nobody picks up the phone and calls me and Vince. I don't even know what was reported, but what you just said was untrue. The fact of the matter is, when I was now head of creative, and Jeff was no longer the buffer, I knew it wasn't going to work between me and Jim. I knew it wasn't. Jeff was being the buffer, and Jeff was making everything work. When Jeff was out of creative, I knew it wasn't going to work, and I said that. I made that clear. Jim Cornette hates me. Jeff was being the buffer between the two of us. Take Jeff out of that equation, you've got an explosive situation here. Ed Ferrara was hired way after the fact. As a matter of fact, when I took over the creative, like when Jeff left, I didn't bring in Ed Ferrara right away. The only reason Ed came in is because when we went to TVs, okay, I was doing everything. I mean, I literally, some days I shot 30 pre-tapes on my own. And basically the load got so overwhelming that I couldn't do it on my own. So Ed was really brought in originally to just help out with the pre-tapes of television. But it had Cornette leaving and Ed coming in were two totally different things.
What was the official reason given to Cornette for him being let go?
I have no idea because I didn't give it. So I don't know what the discussion was. I don't know what was said. All I know is I was honest. And I was like, this guy hates me. Jeff was being the buffer. Everything was okay. Without Jeff, I don't think it's going to be a cohesive working environment. And I said that.
Right. And then when Jeff stepped aside and you rose to power, you guys had the falling out. Obviously, he was let go of the company. What are your thoughts?
Who Jim?
Jim.
Again, bro, there was no falling out. There was no argument between me and Jim. There was no yelling. There was no screaming.
I'm saying after the fact, after he left the company, that's when he went on his tirades and badmouthed you on radio shows and stuff like that.
Oh yeah,
right.
yeah. I mean that's.
What are your thoughts on all that stuff? It is what it is.
Can I tell you something honestly? I don't know. I honestly don't know how one human being can hate another human being so much. In the wrestling business, for one guy to hate another guy so much, I'll never understand that. So like I don't know how to answer that question because I don't know how he can just have such a deep-rooted hate. Because I don't even dislike Jim. I like Jim. It's not me. But I don't know, bro. All I know is, you know, if he had an opportunity to kill me and get away with it, he would.